sold our souls to Elon Musk to have a 6-5 start for the Kings. This year, the Kings 6-5, it seems maybe a little disappointing because expectations have been so high. So where's this all going? What are the problems? We found someone with all the answers, Stripes. Not to put too much pressure on him, but he's got all the answers. Fox 40 sports reporter, Kings Beat pod host, long time. He used to work here. Long time friend of the show and longtime friend, Sean Cunningham. How are you today, Sean?
I'm doing great, guys. I don't know about having all the answers.
All the answers.
I mean, man, I bashed my head up against the wall several times trying to figure out this team through the first 11 games already.
Is the poor 3-point shooting, is it a serious concern for you or still just too early to be overly worried, Sean?
I mean, I guess you could say both, but I mean, this is something that really trickles into the preseason, and typically we don't take much from the preseason, but this kind of reared its ugly head then. I mean, if I was to tell you guys that through 11 games with a minimum of 20 attempts that, DeMar DeRozan would be your leading 3-point shooter at shooting 40%, I don't think anybody would believe that, but I also don't think that people would believe that the Kings would be dead last in 3-point shooting in the league. So,
right.
Yeah, certainly concerning. I mean, it's, you talk to Mike Brown and the coaching staff, and they feel like, any minute they're just going to shoot their way out of this. And he's even starting to tinker a little bit with some of the looks that they're getting and maybe being a little bit more involved in the offense. And I think, certainly while you like to see, a type of game, an entertaining thriller like the one in overtime against the Suns, who obviously they'll see again on Wednesday, but you follow that overtime game with a kind of a clunker in San Antonio the next night. And, when you just can't buy a hoop, and then, you couple that with what you saw where you only hit 3 of 26 against the Clippers. I mean, even for bad 3-point shooting teams, like that's pretty terrible. So, certainly you're going to hope to go from dead booty last, as I like to call it, to just maybe a little bit better, maybe rise up to maybe mediocre or just average. And you don't certainly have to be the best 3-point shooting team in the league, but certainly they expect it to be much better than this.
Sean, what's the answer? Is it just hoping, or is it going out there and getting more shooting? Like, what do you see as the solution if you're Mike Brown?
Well, I think, honestly, it's just getting tape. In my opinion, I feel like when you add somebody like DeMar DeRozan and you couple him with somebody like De'Aaron Fox, two guys who just excel in the mid-range, and certainly Fox has improved his 3-point shooting over the course of his career since he's been here these past few years. But when you're incorporating that and you're getting so many looks from a mid-range, so many looks from the mid-range as is, and two guys that can get to the free throw line, especially as DeRozan, who's elite in both mid-range shooting and obviously getting to the free throw line, I feel like there will be an adjustment period. Now, that being said, they can go out there and be top 10 in the league in scoring despite being so down in 3-point percentage. But I feel like it's just a matter of getting guys to their spots. Hopefully they can just add, just by osmosis, just getting guys more looks. I mean, Keegan Murray is shooting below 30% right now. And I think if you were to poll most of Sacramento Kings fans, him and Kevin Huerter would be considered to be probably the best 3-point shooting guys on the team. So finding ways to get them free, I think their lack of size really hampers them, especially in these early matchups, because they're going up against so many teams that just are bigger than them. So trying to free them up, I mean, really is just getting better looks. But having the tape, you have 10 games, well, really 11, but once you get to 10 games, you really have like a true sample size to start doing some evaluation. And it was funny, Kyle, I mean, you guys, I go in the locker room after that game against the Clippers the other night. I went right to Doug McDermott, who, by the way, didn't even get in that game. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're struggling to find threes. And Mike talks about wanting to get deeper into the rotation and kind of shore up some of these minutes that have honestly have been robust for a lot of his main players, and rightfully so. I don't know that he has a lot of faith deeper into the lineup as is right now, but I had to ask Doug, I said, have you ever been in a team with you on the roster, whether you're playing or not, that was going to have just only 3-pointers made in a game? And he shook his head. He's like, I know there's games I've gone, without a 3 in a game, but certainly not as a team. So, in this day and age in the NBA, I mean, if you're not hitting your threes, you're practically doomed.
Sean Cunningham with us from Fox 40 and the Kings Beat podcast. Not to put you on the spot, but I want to ask you to clarify something you said in your first answer, which I thought was really interesting. Can you speak at all to what you said about Mike Brown trying to alter some of the looks they're getting or trying to get more involved in the offense? That was fascinating, Sean. What exactly do you think is going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much relied on a lot of his guys to run the offense with feel, and you certainly saw it in preseason. He wasn't calling any plays. I think he's been a little bit more involved in terms of what he's wanting, spraying out to the hot guys as he talks about it. They certainly have their marks and their spacing and things like that. But finding for him to be able to maybe call more plays and maybe be a little bit more involved on the offensive end as opposed to trusting some of the players that he's had, because I think a lot of people will look at him and go, well, there's a first unit and a second unit, but that's not true on this team because they really don't do a full second unit. There's always a complement of the first guys, and certain rotations are going to play better with others. So I think when I'm not entirely sure as to, especially now with this injury to Malik Monk over the next 2 weeks, what that looks like. If you're looking at a collection of guys on the floor, obviously with possibility of when you have someone like Jordan McLaughlin on there, you don't really have a true sample size of who's playing well with whom in terms of a 5-man rotation. So when you're going to have to rely on somebody like J-Mac, who obviously has been really solid from the corner three over the course of his last 2 years, they're going to rely on that. And he's only taken 7 threes since he's been on Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
So this is going to certainly open up some opportunity for him. But I think just really Mike Brown getting more involved in the offensive end of the ball and maybe calling some more plays as opposed to rely on your, this free-flowing offense that you've kind of had your bread buttered with.
Gotcha. Sean Cunningham joining us. And Sean, you bring up a great point. And I was going to ask you about this free-flowing offense because I've seen Keegan Murray be ultra aggressive at times, and then I've seen him not be aggressive. Like case in point, last night, 7. Mm-hmm. Is it on him to be more aggressive? Does Mike need to call more plays, have a more structured offense? Because I look at, a guy like Keegan, and I know I'm looking at the numbers right now. He's had 11, 10, 17, 11. What happened last night? Like, did he just get lost in the offense or what?
Yeah, and last night was honestly, Kyle, I was wondering the same thing because there may have been some tired legs, there may have been some things catching up with this team, but with Keegan, who I thought played really, really well. I love the way he's crashing the glass. The double-doubles speak for themselves through the games that he's had. I love the way even, getting into the paint and scoring, having a couple nice putbacks as well in that game winner. But you're right. I mean, the three-point shooting has been inconsistent. Mike Brown talked about the Saturday practice before they went to Phoenix. He talked about, pointing out moments in tape where guys are hesitating to pull the three. And kind of my line of questioning, especially coming off of the Clipper loss, was it conscious or subconscious that they went away from the three? Because Mike Brown wanted to see them take more opportunities. They were 3 of 26, and he said, no, you can go out there and still you can find 10 or 11 more attempts in that game. They still want to get to 40, despite the way they've been shooting. That's still kind of the baseline that they want to, meet every single game. And he's pointing out moments where there's hesitation from some of the shooters. Keegan is maybe the poster child for that. And that kind of stems back to even to his rookie year, where these guys are telling you have a neon green light and you need to shoot it. We shouldn't have to encourage you to shoot the ball. And I think that's been part of his development. I think there's a little bit more fluidity in what he's trying to do, but I think certainly, Kyle, as you point out, that game against San Antonio, he was just a non-factor, and you just didn't see him have a lot of faith in pulling anything and taking the attempts. And I think, again, part of that may have to do with just some of the size that San Antonio plays with. I mean, they kind of get up in you a bit. So, and obviously when you have someone like Wembanyama just on the court, you have to alter almost everything you do to avoid him. So, I don't know. It was a conundrum, but certainly those words that Mike Brown talked about before going to Phoenix in terms of seeing hesitation or any kind of, stalling of the offense and passing up 3-point shots, stood out, and that rang true in that game. And I just wonder how much that 3 of 26 game affected that particular game, because obviously San Antonio was 2 games later. That should be a distant memory at that point, and you have to come out and fire.
Yeah, Sean Cunningham with us, Fox 40 sports reporter. He's also, of course, on the Kings Beat podcast. I want to ask you, Sean, the roster has looked to a lot of people like a little shorthanded, a little thin in the front court. Now you got no Malik for at least a couple weeks. I know that's a short-term thing, but what are you hearing, if anything, about how involved the Kings may be in examining what else is available in the trade market or free agency wise?
To be honest, I haven't heard much. I mean, I
Uh-huh.
would expect them to do that. I would expect them to be, searching and doing their due diligence as they've been kind of known to do. But I also feel like, not that this is going to be, the savior or anything like that, but I think there's some interest in seeing, can Orlando Robinson come back from this MCL and provide anything? Because honestly, here we're talking a lot about 3-point shooting and just how bad that's been, but let's face it. I mean, physicality, a long body, someone who can rebound, give Domas some help, and stretch the floor a bit, all in the same while, and give some rim protection is still sorely needed on this team. And I don't know that Orlando Robinson's going to come in and look like the second coming of Dennis Rodman by any means, but certainly he can offer something. And I think Alex Len, although he's had some moments defensively, has been giving you nothing offensively. There might be an opportunity there for Orlando to do something. And the tough part is there's really no practice time for him to, he's been cleared for contact, but there's really no practice time for him to kind of get his feet wet and immersed into what they're doing. So when you're playing 3 games in 4 nights, you're coming off this back-to-back, you got 3 and 4 nights waiting for you later this week, and then another game on Monday. They might have to utilize shoot around or find something where he can maybe even go 3-on-3 with some of the other guys, like in some of the lower roster players, and maybe find a way to bring him in just to see if he can provide some help in that area. But I mean, when you're talking about, especially with like Utah on the horizon, that Saturday game, they're not very good, but they certainly provide that length and athleticism. So I think he's a guy that they might be able to rely on, but certainly they wouldn't be doing their due diligence if they're not looking at what's out there.
Yeah, they got that stretch, 3 games in 4 nights, tough one against Phoenix and Minnesota. Sean, I'm looking at the landscape of the league, and I feel like, are we overreacting to last night? Because I remember this time yesterday, they were coming off a great win against Phoenix. We're feeling good about this team. There's a chance this week to really get back and get on track, right the ship. Is it still too early to make any sweeping, assertions about this team?
Yes. I mean, look, I think you're still feeling good about what you have in terms of what this team does from a level of compete. I mean, we've seen both De'Aaron Fox and DeMar DeRozan backpack this team, particularly DeRozan. I mean, he's been phenomenal in my opinion since he's been here. He's playing like an all-star. He really is. Him and Sabonis together have been really, really incredible. That's one of the things that absolutely give you, make you want to bash your head against the wall, is they can be an upper echelon elite offensive team, but also be dead last in 3-point shooting. Mm-hmm. So I think both things can be true. This is a tough out. This is a team that's going to compete and give it to you and find ways to score. And I don't think they're going to get blown out of many games. I think you're going to see a lot of games where they're doing the blowouts, but also they're going to go right down to the wire. And that's where, that's what they're expecting. And having 2 clutch players, really 3 clutch players when you have Malik Monk, but with Fox and DeRozan, I mean, there's a lot to like about this Kings team. I mean, certainly you can look at it, and people I talk to around the league will say there's a imbalance to the roster. And I think we can all agree with there is. I mean, you're loaded with guards. You don't have a lot of, size and athleticism, but that's okay right now. If you can keep your head above water, you're going to be a competitive team. I still expect this team to be anywhere from 6 to 10 in the West, and I think that's kind of where they'll be. And I don't think they'll even really go below 8 or 9 when it's all said and done. But through this early going, this is everyone's so banged up already in this Western Conference, and the Kings picking up injuries to Malik Monk is certainly going to hurt. But I think certainly you know right away what you need on this team, and that's probably a benefit when you're still so many months away from the trade deadline.
All right, Sean Cunningham, speaking of Malik Monk, let's say Mike Brown, and he probably does this all the time, and you're too modest to talk about it. If Mike Brown came to you and said, Sean, what do we do about Malik while Malik's out? How do we best handle his absence here over a couple weeks? What would be your advice? What's the best way for the Kings to minimize the negative impact of Malik's absence?
Certainly they've got guys on there who can handle the ball, right? And they can play a playmaking role. Jordan McLaughlin doesn't give you a whole lot of size in that regard, but I love the way they lean on DeMar DeRozan. That being said, I mean, it's what Malik offers just from a whole vibe standpoint. Like he is their identity. And I think that's where he's his loss will be felt the most. And certainly, he can turn it on and get going on an offensive end and get guys involved. He has a brilliant 2-man game with Sabonis, but it's kind of by committee because they just need to have the vibes up for this team. I think DeRozan will help with that a lot. I love seeing, Malik Monk and Domantas Sabonis' two-man game. But Herter and DeRozan have actually had a nice 2-man game with Sabonis as well. Finding him more involved in the offense is always something I'm a fan of, to give him more shots. But I think more than anything, it's not so much of what he does on the court. It's really just what he means to the team in terms of identity. And that's probably the hardest thing to replace when you lose Malik Monk.
Hey, Sean, when I look at last night, and it took me, and I told Whitey this, about 2 hours and 15 minutes to decide. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to ball up the box score, throw it away. To me, I felt like that was an outlier in this regard. Sure, the three-point shooting was bad, and that's been an issue. But this team has been elite from 2-point range, and I don't think I've seen a game this season where the offense has 16 in a quarter, 25 in a quarter, 41 for a half. I feel like the combination of the back-to-back, give San Antonio some credit. Last night, to me, wasn't a true indication of this team.
Yeah, I mean, all those things can be true. The only thing I would push back on is I still think this team, you can't help but point out just how awful they've looked from the perimeter. And you hope that goes away. You hope that they correct that on their own. And I think they will to a certain degree. I don't think they'll be dead last, but 100%. I mean, you've got moments to be able to capitalize, and considering what you went through, to put Phoenix away, which was, lost for only the second time. I know Kevin Durant wasn't on the floor, but they only lost for the second time this season through their first 8 games or whatever it is. And so they're going to have them again on Wednesday, and certainly they're going to be looking for some payback. But like you mentioned a minute ago, Kyle, they have opportunity ahead of them, and they have some get right games, as I like to call them. So, but the fan base, you've been here long enough to where you know that people, it's a roller coaster. And the interesting thing about it is, and this, I haven't figured this part out for this part of the season, but the fans, certainly one way to be on the roller coaster, but it's another thing to have the players on the roller coaster with them. And in past seasons, really the last 2 seasons, really last year as well, the players were on the roller coaster with those fans. They were up and down so much with this team, and they like to say certain things, but then you get them in private and they have concerns about, some of the things that they're doing. This was last year. I haven't heard that so much this year. You take them at the 5 to 10 game sample size, and you can react to the season, of course, but you can just look at the quotes. I mean, they go hot and cold, just like some of the fans do in this town. And I hope we don't see that so much this year, because they need to play that day-to-day kind of game, that old cliche where you take it game to game and don't get too high or too low, because, in doing that, you're going to just create chaos for your team. And I think that's what they did to a little bit last year. They were having to deal with expectations. And, I know a lot of people point out at what Mike Brown talked about before last year, talking about championship expectations, that it's not necessarily, a win just to make the playoffs anymore. And they obviously checked that box the year prior. So this year there's expectations just like there was last year. And there's a lot riding on this season. So I can understand why people get hot and cold with it, but you're right, Kyle, you look at it and you just go, you're fine. You're 6-5 for your first 11 games. You're fine. There's teams that are already looking like, can you imagine if you're a New Orleans Pelicans fan right now?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
They don't have any fans,
there?
do they? There's they're one of those teams. There's no fans of the Pelicans, are there? I mean, back there, but right? Do you know anybody who's yeah?
No, and I was going to say, and I'm really shocked. I was talking about this the other day. Like, you look at the West, there's nothing. I mean, I feel pretty good about where the Kings are right now, to be honest. I even like with some of the things they've done defensively. I think they've had really great moments defensively.
Yeah.
But you look across the league, and it's like the Warriors are certainly a surprise.
Yeah.
And the Mavericks, I haven't loved what I've seen from them. Obviously, they're going to play the Warriors tonight, and that'll be an interesting matchup. But I haven't liked the start that Dallas started out with. I mean, they're kind of righting the ship now, and they're about back to 500. But there's a lot of those knee-jerk early season reactions, and certainly the Kings are among them.
Sean, we appreciate your time as always. We'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks.
You got it, guys. Take care.
All right, Sean.
The Pelicans are one of those teams. Do you know anyone who's around here in this vicinity who's like a Pelicans fan? You probably know
no Zion fans, maybe, but
Celtics fans, sure. Dallas fans, I guess.
But not like representing the Pelicans.
Oh, Pelicans.
Nah.
Who are the Pels playing tonight?